Well, here we go. This is a little bit different for the Public Relations Podcast. I'm going to do a live stream for the first time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch the first part of the first episode of Comms Question Time, which had Sonali, Sokhal and Jim McCarthy. And we were discussing two questions from listeners and then asking the panel how they would deal with those situations. We're just interested to see what kind of comments and thoughts they had about how you would actually tackle these problems that were being put forward. And I thought it might be quite interesting to actually do something live, and this is just a bit of an experiment this time, to basically watch it through and sort of to add some more comments to it, see what you think and that kind of thing. Now, because I haven't made a big announcement about this, I'm not expecting anyone to be watching this live, but if people like this kind of format, then maybe I'll do more of them in future, and it might give us an opportunity to actually literally talk about things in real time. So let me bring this video up on the screen first of all. I feel like I feel like a Twitch streamer for a moment, although I'm not going to play any computer games. I'm going to play this. So I'm looking over here because this is where I can see the screen. So I'll be watching that. And let's have a listen to this. What I thought was interesting was to actually go for the very first one. And the reason I thought this was a good one was because it was a question about a health charity, a heart health charity, so your heart here. And they were finding that they were really struggling to get any coverage from the media for what they do. And they were basically saying, well, look, how do we get this? And I think there's quite a few different angles in there that are quite interesting. So let's give this a go. And what I will do is I will pause it when I have something to say, and let's see what happens. So
this is it. Now have a think about this yourself if you're in the comms world, or if you're in some kind of organization that has a similar problem to this. A small non-profit charity. They're trying to raise awareness of heart health issues. Their day-to-day work involves community outreach, mostly free heart screenings in shopping centres, education in schools, and work with local government on health programmes. And over the past year, the communications team, consisting of just 2 members, has been trying to get more media interest. They sent out press releases to local and national outlets, crafted personalised pitches to journalists using case studies of people who improved their lifestyles after coming into contact with their materials and other things. They've also tried running social media campaigns during Key Awareness Month and partnered with local businesses and schools to draw media interest. But despite the efforts, they've struggled to gain any significant coverage. They can't seem to find a hook that will get journalists excited. They want to start again and take a new approach next year. How can they make this work? We're going to discuss this now as a panel. And I mean, I think my first thought on this is what is the goal of the campaign? I mean, Sonali, they've obviously been putting out, by the sound of it, quite sporadic media. They've tried to reach out to the media and to social media. But it feels like there needs to be a clearly defined goal for this campaign. Where would you start with this, do you think?
I'll actually pause that there because when I first heard this question, I just thought, okay, well, there's a lot of charities out there who say, we need to do a bit of this, need to do a bit of that, need to do a bit of everything. And I think one of the problems with that is that then they tend to come up with this sort of pitch to the media. In this particular case, they're trying to go for the traditional media, which is very generic. It's not particularly clear, or they'll end up listing a few things. They'll sort of go, we're doing this event at this school or this shopping centre at such and such a date. And they won't really, and then they'll do, plus we're doing school appearances, plus we're doing this, plus we're doing this. And that makes it basically just a public announcement that you might as well put on a notice board, rather than being something that is a news story. And so it's far better to go, okay, well, what actually is our main thing this month or this week, or what is it that we're trying to put across? What is that one specific story? And then how can we pad that story out, rather than just going, here's an announcement. So if you're going into a school, and you're trying to get, as they were saying here, they're trying to get schools to actually adopt these sessions and have them go in and do it. If you're trying to do this, okay, so that's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, that's what we're trying to get them to actually do, to get people to go into, to get schools to actually invite us in. So that's our story. So what have we got to get around that? Have we got to get some kind of research about school children, I don't know, might suffer from heart disease, or that if a child learns good habits now, in 30 years' time, they'll have a far higher chance of surviving or not getting heart disease or something like that. So by having a clear idea about what the story actually is and what they're trying to achieve, they're going to be more focused. But let's have a listen to what Sonali said.
I think I'd start with a clinical study. I think I'd have a proper third-party clinical
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Sonali's going straight in there, saying that you need a research, you need some kind of story, something tangible to go on.
Study done with a data centric approach, because I feel that media loves that, at least in India, and people, that kind of stuff will actually get you the kind of media eyeballs you're looking at. If you can talk about, and especially in a country like India, I'm just giving an example where we're anyway prone to heart diseases more than other, races. I think to pick up, maybe pick up the potential reasons for heart disease, and what is going to create what kind of factors can.
One thing I would say here is that certainly when I was an editor and journalist, is that if you had a story that came through with a percentage, or a survey or some research that said that 72% of people said X, it always carries more weight mentally in your head when you're looking through these stories than saying X charity is doing some event. Because it's something tangible. It gives you a nice instant headline that you can use. So, on the radio, for example, then you would just probably lead with 70% of people are doing X, and such health charity are doing Y, and we've got them on now to comment about that. And you don't talk about the fact they're going into schools, or they want to be invited into schools straight away. What you do is you start off with that angle, and you talk about, well, why is it 70%? Da, 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 and then they lace in the fact that they want to get invited into schools into that. So very much so on statistics and figures and a research report.
And be the tipping points for those, and give those percentages to people. Those kind of things are going to really get the media involved, according to.
So this is the kind of thing that the organisation itself should be looking into and getting their own research out there. Because I think the problem is, if you're trying to attach yourself to campaigns that are already existing, it's often hard, isn't it, to get your name to be prominent.
Yeah, so they can always work with another medical body, a credible medical body. You will need a credible medical body for this, otherwise nobody's going to take them seriously. So I would always.
But do you think it needs to come from them rather than trying to tie into?
The point I think I was trying to get across here, and Sonali was reflecting that with the importance of credibility. So I think there's a couple of elements. It's one of the problems you get is that if you are just commenting on someone else's work, and you're not adding any tangible improvement on top of what that work was, there's no point mentioning you. If you're just giving an opinion, if you're a heart health charity and you say, we welcome this report by X and Y and Z, then as a journalist, I'm going to go and look at X and Y and Z's report, and I'm not even going to mention you because you're not relevant. So either you're going to go out and do that research yourself, or you're going to add something tangible to it. So, for example, and I'm making up here, but let's say the health report from this established body said, 70% of people will get heart disease by the time they're 50 or whatever. I don't know what the figures are, but let's say that. So if you then sent that to the media and you said, this report's come out, we welcome this report, that's not a story. But if you then go, 70% of people nationally get this, but what we found in our area where we operate, we think it's about 40%, and we think the reasons are here, you've got a strong story. You've got an angle certainly for local media, local influencers, local press, even like council notices and all this kind of thing. You've got a lot of local strength in there, even for putting stuff out to schools. But you've also potentially got an angle on the national story as well, because you're seeing regional variations. And that helps a national journalist to build their story, to expand it more and make it more in depth. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that it's important for you to have credibility and something to offer in your own right, rather than just commenting on others. But what Sonali is rightly saying is that it's got to be credible. You can't just come up with an opinion. And as she's saying, you need an established body. So hopefully with the Heart Health Foundation, you've got some kind of relationship with one of those. So it's both of those.
Yeah, because I can see how you can, a lot of people will try and newsjack, won't they? They'll see a report comes out there and try and put their comment forward.
Yes.
But if you are the source of that research, it kind of carries more clout, doesn't it?
And the clout is important, but so is credibility. So I think if you have credibility, people will not just take anybody seriously. They will want to know who has done the research. So just to give you an example, with Sirona, we are actually tying up with a third-party researcher to see the changing, tendencies in menstruation, etc. If Sirona makes those claims, nobody's going to take them seriously. It always has to come from a credible body. That's my only contention, for it to be carried by mainstream media.
Well, one of my thoughts listening to the actual scenario is that they've struggled to get any kind of attention. So it's like, how can they? I mean, Jim, what's your thoughts on this? Where do you think they should be starting with this, thinking about how to organize this campaign next year so that someone actually listens?
Well, a lot of times,
one thing I would say is that if you've been doing this for a while and getting no attention, then ultimately it's about saying, okay, well, what are we doing wrong? Because we must be doing something wrong. We're not pitching right. And so often I think in these cases, it is the story, it is the strength of the pitch. That if fundamentally, even if you've got a relationship with the local media, if you're not getting in there, there's something wrong with the story that you're offering and you need to improve that. Let's hear what Jim had to say.
when you're doing media relations like that, whether it's for a nonprofit here or even for a large company like the ones we work with, it can be like taking shots in the dark. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you have a relationship, but it can be very, very chancy. And so while you're doing that spade and shovel work, at the same time, I would recommend you got to be building those stories yourselves. So here's an easy way to do that. In any kind of story about health in that fashion, it's better to make it, I think, about transformation and not about taking your medicine or doing more exercise or giving them, instructions or a lecture. For each of the patients that NGO is likely dealing with who have had cardiac issues and done the right thing and done the regimen that they're recommending, there's a before and after story. And that person, the individual patient, can articulate that in their own voice.
There's a couple of points actually in here. I think the first one is the fact that people sometimes say we don't have a story, and yet when you start looking into it, and you do have stories. There's always going to be examples, whether that is a case study of someone that's used whatever you're doing, or whether you are. I said this in the PR Bites newsletter the other day, and I said that sometimes, as a comms person, instead of just relying on management or relying on managers to tell you what the stories are, by going to the people on the ground, by going to the people who are actually answering the question, doing support or pressing the button, they'll often have anecdotes and extra stories that other people wouldn't have thought of that may well make a really interesting angle. So there always is some kind of story. And
right there, you've got a 30-second or even a 60-second video in which you can take clips, still photos, or video of what they were like before, the struggle they were having, and the transformation they had afterward, in which they can speak in a first-person, credible voice about their lifestyle improvement, their health improvement. And guess what? You can do that with the practitioners too. Every cardiologist in that organization that they work with, I'm sure, has success stories of individual patients and can describe those in a first-person voice. All of those stories can be strung together in a Twitter thread. And that thread, the first link in the thread, can be placed directly in the social media feeds of journalists that are on that.
Yeah, I mean, Jim's starting to move on to the sort of technique of delivering this story now. But again, it's about coming up with those credible case studies. When I think about my approach to comms, it's that kind of 4-prong approach. And the first prong within it is about having that foundational story and looking for those foundational stories. What is it that gives you the credibility? And if you don't have it, what could you create that gives you the credibility? And this applies, whether you're making buns or bolts. It's become my favorite phrase, that. There's always something that you can build up. And if you haven't got something that's automatically within the organization, what can you do on top of that? What stunt, what challenge? The example I give is like, I talked about this on the podcast as well a long time ago. There was this guy who I was chatting to who was a mobility scooter salesperson, an engineer. And sadly, he didn't do it. But we were saying, well, look, how can you get across this? His core marketing messages were the reliability of the product that he was building. And I said, well, why can't you? This is in Australia. So I was saying, well, why can't you drive across Australia? And he kind of laughed. And I said, well, is it technically possible? And he said, well, if I strap on enough batteries on this thing, then it would be possible to do. And he said, yeah, it would certainly be possible to do. They're really reliable, these things. And I said, well, would it be really uncomfortable? And actually, I think he said it would be really uncomfortable. I said, well, that's an even better story, because media are going to be far more interested in watching this guy rattling along on this buggy going across the outback of Australia than they are in terms of someone sitting in there in luxury. So anyway, the point is that there's always something, and is only a nugget that isn't quite strong enough. You can build on that to build that story and get something stronger out.
Beat. So go on your media list. Look at all the reporters, national and local also, and broadcast and print, and follow their social media. And when they say, hey, we're looking for stories, or hey, here's an interesting new report, you can jump right into that comment thread as the NGO and say, look, we've got 18 stories right here of individuals who've experienced in the real world what you're talking about.
Yeah, Jim's making a really good point here, which is about not just setting up those stories for a particular campaign, but making sure that you've got them in place. I mean, because there's an interesting article out the other day where they were discussing commentary for over the national budget in the United Kingdom. I've just had a boom. What happened there? Something on my computer went bong. Don't know what it was. Hopefully it's still recording. Anyway, or streaming out to you. So they made an interesting point about the budget, and they were saying what national media need from people who are pitching stories to them. And what they need is depth. But what they said was the problem is that a lot of these people you haven't got time to react. So you're having some kind of budget. You're having an announcement by the government. So no one knew what was going to be in there. And so the difficulty for journalists is to kind of process this really fast, and often these long, boring documents. Process it really fast and get it out there as fast as possible. So if you've got some organisation like this heart health organisation who has some report that they did or some research that they did, they're listening to the budget and they go, oh, that's interesting, that affects this. You can go to that journalist and not just give an opinion and say we welcome it, but say because of this research and this and this and this. And that's exactly what they're looking for. They're looking at strength of a story that can add to the dialogue that they're already developing. So that's the point he's making there, is not just setting these up for a one-off thing, but actually having them in stock so that you can use them for newsjacking as well.
And that's a much more direct way to do it. And in the meantime, the stories you've built, those can have a virality and a spread in and of themselves. The Twitter thread I just described can be a social media ad. So you can buy the words on Twitter, for example, associated with Heart Awareness Month or, whatever, myocardial infarction. And everybody searching for those terms or seeing tweets with those terms mentioned sees your thread as an ad attached to it. So it's a way to take control, I think, of the narratives and the transformational stories, even while you're taking your half-court shots on traditional media relations.
Sonali, I can see you're thinking. Go for it.
Yeah. So I would also want to get
add to that. I think I get what Jim's saying there is that I think that one of the problems with traditional PR is that people think, oh, it's just about traditional press, and it is not. Those stories, those foundational stories that you're creating with your organization should be repurposed in millions of different ways. I mean, it can go on leaflets, it can go in paid ads, it can go anywhere. It shouldn't just be about a pitch to the media.
a celebrity, if it doesn't have to be an A-lister, but maybe one or a few celebrities to champion the cause, because I feel that really gives a lot of people want to hear stories, but they want to hear stories sometimes of celebrities. And what I've realized with Indian media is it could be, we had a singer and she had a small condition ailment where she lost her hearing for a while. And there were 20 stories on what that condition is all about. And everybody wanted to read them because celebrity brings that kind of attention. So, and I think celebrities are always looking to attach themselves to a cause as well. So if we can speak to a couple of minor and even major celebrities to be part of a campaign, and we can have, like Jim very rightly said, during a heart disease awareness month, if we can get people to actually speak up about it on social media. There could be some celebrities who had a personal concern with heart disease or it's been their journey. If we can have their support, I think that will really help. The other thing that we can do is we can have a sporting event like a marathon or something like that to bring more awareness on this. The proceeds could go to charity for.
That's interesting. There's a couple of things in there. Again, I mean, the celebrity aspect. One of the problems I think you've got with heart health is that you've got a very big topic where there's a lot of charities involved in it. And I think what Sonali was saying there, which was really interesting, was she was talking about how the celebrity who couldn't hear or lost a hearing for a time had kind of quite a niche condition. And getting celebrities on board with heart charities is going to be very hard because they've been approached a million times and whatever. So it's about finding someone that's had a particular something you can connect. So some particular aspect of heart disease. So, oh God, again, I'm not a doctor, but there must be different variations of heart disease. It's not just one thing. So someone that's had a particular condition, can you find that person rather than just going a celebrity that had a heart problem? If you can find someone that had that particular condition, you're immediately going to have a far better connection with them, and they're going to be able to push that angle of it better. Even if you are a general heart charity, getting that one person on board might be good for the overall message as well. But by niching into those specifics, and also you're making the story stronger because you're making something that's a bit newer as well compared to just heart disease.
Or people suffering from heart disease, or just to raise awareness. In India, for instance, Pinkathon, which is a women's run to raise breast cancer awareness, has become such a big movement. Today, we have about 30 to 40,000 women participating every year. They have brand ambassadors who are celebrities, by the way, both women and men, to champion the cause. So I think if you can make it about community, and I think PR overall and marketing are today becoming about community. It's the role of community is getting larger. So you have to build a community of people who believe in the cause. And I think that can come.
There's so much stuff in this.
Yeah, I'll start there as well. It's interesting what Sonali was saying about community. I do remember, this has been going on for years, but I remember that a BBC journalist said to me one time that if you want to get a story across and a journalist hasn't heard of you before, have a lot of followers behind you. Because what they'll do is they'll check you out, or if you've got their attention, they'll check you out and they'll see, well, have you got loads of followers who are engaging with you? And if you appear credible on social media, then there's a chance that they'll reach out to you because they think, oh, you've got the authority. So building community is not just about having some followers who can pay you subscription every month for your charity donation. It's about actually having a movement behind you that you want to be directly engaging with. Again, it's all PR, isn't it? Because by building that social credibility, you can have a lot more clout when you go and reach the media as a whole. Right. This is slightly awkward because I was planning on doing this as a live stream. That ping that I had a short time ago was something that I have actually got to do. So I'm going to have to round it up here. But I think it's quite interesting, though, just to try it as a bit of an experiment. What I'll do is I'll make a bit more of a note about this next time, and I'll tell people when I'm going to do it. And if you would like to join me so we can actually talk about the issues that are being discussed as they go along, I think it could be really, really interesting. But hopefully you found a little bit of value in this little video as well. Bit of an experiment. Let me know what you think. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn at Richard Midson, Midson, or via the usual, the publicrelationspodcast.com. So I will press stop on this feed now, if I can work out how. There we go.